Welcome to Hardcore Race Products. We're here today to demonstrate a dyno. These days dynos are becoming more and more important for two-stroke and four-stroke racers, particularly with fuel injection now, so you've got different mappings, different setups that you want to do for different circuits. Getting the edge is everything now. Doesn't matter if you're on a 65, an 85, 125, 250 or 450 four-stroke, power delivery and performance is everything. As you can see with the dyno here, what we do have is we've got cooling fans, we've got exhaust extraction. So we can cool the engine while it's running, so we can put it under heavy loads. Nothing like necessarily what you'd put it under on circuit, but certainly enough so that you can get the exhaust pipe up to temperature and the engine up to temperature and get a genuine reading on performance as is and for changes that you may well do. When we're doing our dyno testing, most of the time we also include heat sensors around the engine so that we can keep a good level of consistency in the testing, because if the engine is cooler, the exhaust pipe's cooler, particularly on a two-stroke, you're going to find different performance features. So it's very important that we keep consistency within the engine's condition and to have a quality dyno which gives us good consistent runs. Basically all dynos will do the same job. I do hear stories of a lot of different figures coming from different dynos, and people say, oh, this dyno is a very hard dyno on the engine, it shows very low figures, so his one shows very high figures. This is a bit of white magic, to be honest. The bottom line with it is that with a dyno there is a mathematical equation within the computerization of it, and that is a fixed figure as such. The functionality of a dyno, regardless of its manufacturer, is basically the same. So it's to take a calculation from the rear wheel of the motorcycle's performance. Normally, in years gone by, that would have been on a fixed massive dyno. The previous dyno we had, the drum on the back weighed half a ton, and as the engine accelerated that, there was a level of electronics around that drum that then calculated the speed that the engine was accelerating that drum, and therefore you then got a horsepower figure that was related to that. These days it's not enough. Now you have to have a load cell, which is then attached to the drum, and then the mass of the drum, of its weight of the load cell, which is done through magnets, is either increased or decreased depending on what you're looking to achieve as far as assessing the type of performance from the engine. So on a lot of fuel injection systems and so forth and carburetors, you need to know what the fueling's up to at certain RPMs in certain throttle positions. By having a load cell you can increase and decrease the load at any point that you wish to, and therefore the engine can be held at a certain throttle position at a certain RPM, and then you can take those live and printable readings from that. So these days ignition mapping and fueling is a lot more achievable on a machine such as this. As far as it goes, if you're going to use a dyno to help yourself and help the guy on the dyno, make sure the bike is clean and tidy and there isn't mud dropping off it and so forth, and everything's easily accessible. The other thing is to make sure that the train and sprocket are in good condition, as is the gearbox oil, because again these are things that will affect the dyno run. It will be consistent. You know, if you have a standard exhaust system on the bike and you have a bad chain and sprocket, then you'll get a dyno reading. If you then change that and fit a different exhaust system, the figures may well be different, but they will still carry the characteristic of your engine with a bad chain and sprocket set on it. So if you want really, really good readings and so forth, and clarity within your dyno testing for every single time you may visit the dyno several times, for that reason it's always best to stay with a good chain and sprocket from the outset, because if you turn up one day with a bad chain and sprocket and then you dyno test it and then you come back later on with a good chain and sprocket on there, the figures will be different, and then you start to maybe a little bit of kidology or whatever in your own thoughts as to how you're going with your engine's performance. So deliver a good clean bike, plenty of fuel in it which is nice and fresh, good chain and sprocket, nice clean air filter, and something that's not going to cover my dyno particularly in mud. On from that, very, very straightforward. You can see we've got the two fans. There's the load cell, which is a very, very clever piece of equipment there. This is the drum. In this case, because we've got the load cell, this drum doesn't weigh very much, maybe 30-40 kilos. So it's a completely different kettle of fish than what we've done before. It's all very much about the load cell. Extraction, apologies to Dyno Pro. It took a very nice looking extractor system they had and modified it to particularly suit my needs. But anyway, there we go. This is how we extract the exhaust gases out into the open air. Keeps the air inside here a lot clearer and stops me getting gassed. The fan's pointed towards the radiator. Another thing that's important is, particularly with a two-stroke, is the fact that the heat and temperature of the exhaust system is very, very important to the characteristics of the engine. So in a lot of cases, I make sure the fan's do stay away from the exhaust, or if they get a light spraying on there of air. Really, you don't want to have these fans will drive up to 90 miles an hour of wind speed. That's not really what's going to happen on the track. As you can see on the screen up there, we have all of the rev counter. The speed of the drum is converted into a road speed, and then in the centre we have the air-fuel ratio. Because it's a two-stroke, I don't tend to feel that I need to use the air-fuel ratio on a two-stroke, because I'm very familiar with the way that the bike feels and I know whether it's fueling okay. We have here our 4 heat sensors, which I won't plug in today, but you'd have a temperature readings come on here. I've got 4 different areas where I can go, and they come through this modem box here. And then you've got your air fuel, you've got your RPM of your engine, which is done on a lead, which comes through to here, comes straight off the HT lead, and then you have your speed. Attached to the load cell here, this tells me how much load is going on there, and this actually gives me a live reading of the horsepower of the engine. We also have a live graph, because from the live graph, as you'll see when we do the run, it actually shows me. So even while I'm doing runs, I can see if I've got a very linear power delivery or whether I've got holes in my power. So here we go. So you've had your bike dyno tested. Hopefully if there's any faults or whatever, they've come up and been highlighted, and you'll know either you've sorted it or how you're going to go forward and sort those things, such as slipping clutches, misfires, anything like that, so you can deal with those. But bottom line is, the 2015 bike on this dyno produces 22.5 horsepower. You can tailor then your power anywhere up to about 28.5 horsepower. So there's quite a lot of scope in performance. If your rider is fresh onto an 85, you know, you're going to want delivery. It's going to be important. You know, if we had one of our full-blown race bikes as driven by Tom or Harry, then you're probably going to go slower, if I'm honest. You need to be able to just settle in, get used to it, have a bike you can drive out the corners and that you can handle. And after 3 laps in the heavy sand, you're not wanting to go home because you just can't hold on to the bike anymore. So it's horses for courses. You need to be honest with the guy who's doing the dyno testing about the standard riding of your lad. You know, budgets, you can look to improve the bike quite nicely for £200, £300, £400 through to a full-blown British Championship bike, which can end up costing you sort of £1,300, £1,400 by the time you put all the other bits and pieces on top of just the basic engine tuning. I can normally give you quite a lot of feedback and information and test a few points for that. And you don't waste another Sunday with a bike that's not running correctly or wondering whether or not it's your son or whether his bike just isn't performing. This should really mean that when you go out on Sunday that you have the best bike for the job. Job done.